Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about the proposed, we have yet to see if it's going to happen, meeting in Istanbul on Thursday. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and we're gonna talk about. Well, first, what's the guy's name? We got to start with Justin Maverick. Justin Maverick says, "Not you too, Garland. Please say it ain't so and ditch the AI generated thumbnails." I've been doing AI generated thumbnails for a while. It's kind of fun. I just think of something and put it in there and see what shows up. So at any rate, we got AI generated. Oh no, does that mean that like I've like gone over to the dark side? I'm now working for the man because I've used AI generated thumbnails. Let's hope not. But at any rate, let's get down to it. But thank you for watching there. Just a maverick. I guess if you're a maverick, I guess, I don't know, AI generated thumbnails aren't mavericky enough. Anyway, let's go. But thank you, Just a Maverick, for watching and for the comment. So let's talk about the meeting in Istanbul Thursday, which I think is rather consequential. Let me tell you why. If it happens, I don't know if it's going to happen. For you, those of you who have been under a rock and haven't been paying attention, here's what we got. Apparently, the EU leaders, as it were, they decided, the coalition of the willing, coalition of the sniffing, it may be based on some things that have come out lately, but we don't know. But the coalition of the willing apparently got together on a train from Kiev, and they had a high time, and they came up with a devious and diabolical plot somewhere on that train ride. And apparently it was to give Russia an ultimatum and to give Russia the same offer that Russia has turned down from the very beginning. Russia, that offer that we made over and over again that you always said no to. Oh, we're going to give it a shot again, which simply means this. They knew that Russia would say no. And so the plan was not to lay a trap for Russia so that Russia would have to take it, because they knew that Russia would say no. You might have heard me say this before, but I'll say that for people who might not have heard it. It was a trap for Trump. Apparently, Trump is, he really doesn't want to be involved in the Ukraine thing. You can say what you want about Trump, like him, hate him, that's up to you. One thing is obvious to me. He wants out of the Ukraine debacle any way he can, but he's dealing with his own shortcomings and the trap. He's got mouse traps all around him. Bear traps, I guess, would be a more appropriate metaphor, laid by the neocons. So he's trying to figure out how to navigate that. I guess he's got bigger fish to fry. But at any rate, so the plan obviously was to drag Trump into more sanctions and to say we're going to go after the Russian shadow fleet. And of course, that would mean maybe trying to go into the Black Sea, trying to attack Russian tankers or blow them up or God only knows what, right? So they had some plan, but it was to drag the United States in. So eventually they could go to war with Russia, bring the United States in, and everybody could be snuffed out in a nuclear blast. Boy, what brilliant people we have here running the EU. No wonder every single time we got a world war, it's France, Germany, and the UK in the middle of it. Every single time there's a world war, those three bastards, the ruling elite from those three countries, are in the middle of it, causing it. So anyway, they're up to no good again, but I think they have a problem here. This is going to be a very interesting and unique problem, and let me explain why. So their plan, we're going to screw up Victory Day. We're going to come out on Victory Day, and we're going to say, here's our ultimatum for you, Putin, and you better take it, but we know you won't. So then we'll go to Trump and say, okay, Trump, we got to do the sanctions. Boom, we got Trump all in, adding more sanctions, adding additional sanctions. That's what they want, Trump adding additional sanctions. Well, we found out a few things since then. One of the things that I find interesting is apparently these geniuses at some point recently have spoken to other leaders in the EU about additional sanctions against Russia. And they came up with this plot, right? And remember, the plot is drag Trump into more sanctions, the EU and everybody, and Trump and everybody does more sanctions. Well, apparently they didn't talk to the other European leaders about sanctions. So they came up with this brilliant plot, but I guess it never dawned on them that the sanctions have to be passed by all the EU countries, all the NATO countries, and the other EU countries. Well, not NATO, but the EU countries, and some of the EU countries weren't on board with it. And at any rate, they hadn't run it by the other people. These people are such idiots. But that ain't the important part. Okay, that's not the important part. The important part is this. So now they have to go to, well, apparently Trump tweets out, he says, hey guys, this is fantastic. Let's make this happen. We're going to get big things done in Istanbul. We're going to chill out in Istanbul. Like, what are they drinking in Istanbul? I don't know, whatever. Darn these people. And look at it, it says potential spam. And of course it's potential spam. Langley, Virginia. Why would you always get potential spam from Langley, Virginia? Anyway, let me continue. So, Trump says yay, and Zelensky initially says, I'll meet Putin there. I'll be there to meet Vladimir Putin. Well, you know, obviously Vladimir Putin did not say that he was going to go there. He brought up, you know, there was a straw man. The straw man is, I'll meet Putin there. And then when I get there and say, Putin's not here, or say, well, if Putin's not going, he said he was going to go, now he's backing out. You know, they were building a straw man as though Vladimir Putin, President Putin, said he was going to be there, and now they can say he's not, but he said he was going to, so he's back. Boom, we got a straw man. He screwed up. But the reality is, he never said he would. Apparently, the Russians have named the team that's going. Here's what's interesting. Trump was all for it, and Trump just happens to be in the Middle East. And Trump has been implying that he might show. Maybe I'll go. Maybe I'll show up. Maybe I need to stop by. What does that do? That leaves a little bit of the last I saw. I've been checking to see. He hasn't said for sure whether or not he's going. So apparently at this point, we don't know whether or not Trump's going, but we know he's in the area, which puts a little more pressure on the Kiev regime, right? So Trump's in the area. He might show, he might not, right? And they don't really want to piss him off. So Trump's in the Middle East, and he might show up there. The Russians have named their team a very, very substantive team. Some of their highest officials to be there. Trump now says he's going to have Wickoff and I think Kellogg of all ungodly people, but Wickoff will be there, right? Which is critical. It is very, very critical. This is important for the discussion that I'm going to have here. So apparently, Trump may or may not be there. The Russians will be there. Wickoff, Kellogg will be there. Now you got a problem for the Kiev regime for a number of reasons. Let's name them. Number one, apparently there was a law passed and signed a few years immediately after the start, shortly after the start of the special military operation, within months, and it was that no one could meet with Vladimir Putin or with the Russians to negotiate as long as President Putin is in office. So here's the problem the Ukrainians got. If they violate that one time, they can never use it again. So basically, if they send someone there, two things. If they send someone there to negotiate with the Russians, number one, that business about we can't negotiate with the Russians because of the law is out the window. They can never use that again. But number two, anyone in Ukraine, and there are various forces in Ukraine that don't want them to meet with the Russians, can then say to their leaders, you violated the law. The law says you can't do that. And won't they be right? I'm sure the neo-Nazis and the Azov battalion and their ilk will be in there saying, hey, because I guarantee you there are people in Ukraine right now saying, don't go. You can't meet with the Russians. Why? They're not even human, for God's sake. Well, how could you meet with somebody that's not even human? Right? And they can make the argument in Ukraine, you can't meet with them because the law says no. If you do, you'll be violating the law and we'll throw you out of office, arrest you, or in Ukraine, possibly far worse, right? So they've got that internal contradiction that they're going to violate their own law by meeting with the Russians. But how can they not? At this point, they ask for it. Man, Putin tore that up and slapped them right in the face with their own attack. They said, basically, let me go further. They didn't really ask for a negotiation. They made an ultimatum. But what the Russians skillfully and artfully did was they turned that ultimatum into the opening salvo of a of a discussion, of a negotiation, right? They received serve, and instead of just saying we'll take that as an ultimatum, they said it went like this: you better do what you better do what I want, or else. That was the way that it came from the coalition of the willing, of the sniffing. And what the Russians did was said, it's an interesting proposal you have there. I say we meet in Istanbul, work out the details. Oh God, you want a ceasefire? Of course we want to. Everybody wants a ceasefire. Ceasefire, man. That's what we've been talking about. That's what we glad to see you come over to my side. Let's do this. We'll a few minor details we got to iron out. You came up with it, and we're willing to say yes. The answer is yes. We're ready to do a ceasefire. We just got to iron out a few minor details. They didn't say no, and that was the key. They didn't refuse to. They didn't accept it as an ultimatum. They accepted it as an offer. You better do this. That's an interesting proposal, but I guess we got a few deals. We're ready to do it. I ain't saying we won't do it. Sure, of course, a ceasefire. I'm like, come on, who doesn't want a ceasefire? We're down with a ceasefire. I was just telling my buddy Sergei Ryabkov, I was just on the phone with Medvedev the other day, and I said, how can we get a ceasefire? And what do you know? Out of the blue, you guys turn around and say, hey, let's do a ceasefire. Will wonders never cease? There is a God. I think we finally got to a point where we can get something done. Okay, so let's do this. Of course, I mean, we're all reasonable adults here. A few minor details, certainly you got to iron out. We've had our bumps in the road. Certainly we've had our disagreements in the past. I mean, it happens amongst friends. But now that you brought that up, let's get it done. Thursday, Istanbul, we'll be there. Be there or be square, buddy. And see, so they threw it back. Okay. And it was solidified by Trump. They threw it back. And there's Trump sitting on the sideline, right? Trump's sitting there watching it like a tennis ball. Whoop, whoop, back and forth. But here's what he saw. But Trump has a problem. He wants out. So Trump sits there. You see, talk to the EU. Hey, we got Putin where we want him, and we're going to tell him to do this. And doggone, he better do it. Trump, are you on with us? And Trump's like, okay, yeah, okay. And they're like, okay, let's go. Putin, do what we want. Putin's like, great idea. We'll talk about it Thursday in Istanbul. And Trump's like, thank you. I'll be there too. Great idea. Who would have saw that coming? Trump was the guy who really made it happen. And I don't mean made it happen by anything that he did assertively. I mean that he gave legitimacy. See, to keep in mind, the plan was to say to Putin, this is an ultimatum, and stick by that. Yes or no. I want a yes or no answer, right? Nothing else, yes or no. Two options. And when Putin didn't give him a yes or no, the plan for them was anything other than a yes is a no. So when Putin said whatever the hell he was going to say, their plan was, well, you didn't say yes, so that's a no. So, okay, great. Trump, let's do it. So when Putin turned the yes or no into a let's get this ironed out and we can do it, right? Trump saw that as an out for him too, because he was reluctantly. The appearance to me, could be wrong, is that he reluctantly went along with it, and that Putin gave him what he wanted, gave him an out, gave him a back door. They pushed him into a corner. Putin opened the door. He ran out the door, and he's like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And then he took that and put the pressure. If we're honest about that, Trump clearly does not like Zelensky. He doesn't like Starmer. He doesn't like Macron. I mean, those people were literally sending people here to help his opponent beat him. So he don't think they're on his side, right? So bottom line is, Trump then gives the legitimacy to the Russians' claim, as it were, that this is what they received was not an ultimatum. It was the opening of negotiations. So that's what the Russians are saying. This is not an ultimatum. This is the opening of negotiations. Now, they didn't say that. They reacted implicitly as though that were the case. And then Trump joined in. Yep, that's exactly what it was. It was the opening, and it was the opening that I was looking forward to. So I'll be there Thursday, and I'm getting somewhere. This is a critical meeting. If it happens, it's a critical meeting, and I'll tell you why. So now what happens? Trump may be there, he may not, but the ghost of he'll be there in spirit, though not if not in physical form, right? So the ghost of Trump, the presence of Trump, and I have a feeling Trump might show up, but the presence of Trump is hovering over the meeting like a shadow. As everybody plans what they're going to do, they're also thinking Trump might just be there. And I'm sure, the Russians, they're smart. They're so smart. I mean, obviously they just they just, outfox these mutton heads. I'm sure the Russians have a plan. If Trump's there, we do this. If Trump's not there, we do this. If Trump's there, we say this. If Trump's not there, I mean, if they're smart people, I guarantee you they have alternate plans. One if Trump's there, one if Trump's not there, right? If Trump's there, they're probably going to work to try to involve him in the discussion. If Trump is there, if I'm the Russians, I say, hey, old Trumpy, why don't you come on in the meeting? And, we know you love fries. We just happen to bring some McDonald's fries, your favorite. Would you like ketchup on them, right? In comes Trump. Because if Trump's there, you can really put the pressure on these people, right? Wickoff's going to be there in Kellogg. Well, if Trump's there, Kellogg kind of it kind of schlumpifies old Kellogg, because we know Kellogg being there is the same as Starmer or Macron or Merrick's being there, right? So what happens now? Let's say this meeting goes down. I don't know how the Ukrainians can do it. And whoever doesn't, if I was the Ukrainian, I wouldn't do it and then go back to Kiev. I'd ask for, refugee status in Istanbul and never leave, because the neo-Nazis may very well put a bullet in you. They may be like, you were sitting next to a Russian, weren't you? Well, no, not really. Yeah, you were. I can smell Russian all over you. Adolf, get over here. Shoot this guy. I wouldn't want to, I mean, you got to come back and talk to the neo-Nazis after talking to Russians. They're not human. You're not allowed to talk to them. That's the foundation of European fascism. The foundation of European fascism is to hate Russia. And that's because Russia's got so many natural resources. You got to hate Russians because that's the only way to get to their natural resources. That's what it all comes down to. Anyway, let us continue. So let's just say this goes down. The Ukrainians need to pull out bad. They need to get out bad. But let's just say for some reason, these poor bastards end up in there. I almost feel sorry for the situation they'll be in, but not really. Here's the issue they've got, right? They've been living in a narrative, but that narrative, the rubber has never had to meet the road. They've never had to have a discussion with someone who disagrees with them and who has some facts to back up their disagreement, right? I once did had a debate about Russiagate with this guy who's an educated, knowledgeable guy, but I mean, he's just an ideologue, liberal ideologue, that is. And I had a debate with him for this. I won't get into it, but it was this magazine in the U.S. put this thing on, and it was about Russiagate some years back, when Russiagate was hot. And I feel as though I ate him alive, and a lot of other people did. And it was because, and what I recognized during that debate is this: nobody challenged him. He was actually coming from a congressman's office. He was a staffer, a representative of a representative for this congressman's office, right? A neoliberal, Russia-hating congressman, Democrat. And what was obvious to me based on his lack of preparedness, like when I would challenge him on a question, here's a guy with, highly educated, he'd go, and it was like a question you really ought to be able to answer. Like, why do you believe this? He'd be like, and he'd just search and come up, pull something out of the air. And then I just, tear it to pieces. And what was obvious was this: that he operated in his congressman's office and in a realm of Democrats who all knew beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty that Russiagate was true and real. And they never really had to defend it. He didn't have any practice defending it. It didn't even register with him that these things needed to be defended, because nobody he knew ever challenged him. And when I challenged him, he was thoroughly unprepared. So here's what you have with the Ukrainians and the Europeans. How can they negotiate with someone who has the facts when they're thoroughly unprepared, when they have been living in a realm of people who all agree, a bunch of bobbleheads? The Russians are evil, right? The Russians decided to do that because Putin something or other, Putin's evil. Yeah. And they just want to expand and take all of Ukraine, right? Like this, they want to take all of Ukraine. Yeah. And what happens if they go in there and say, well, we want to make agreement that you can't take all of Ukraine, and the Russians are like, good idea. We don't want Western Ukraine. So, hey, we can do that. You're not supposed to say that. You're evil. You want all of Ukraine, right? And see, one of the things the Russians can do, and I imagine they'll plan it, is they can poke holes in their narratives. The narratives that the Russians are unreasonable. The Russians are unreasonable. You can't talk to these people. They don't listen, right? Sorry. They want to take all of Ukraine. They want to expand the Soviet Union and start it up again. Once they cross the borders, once they take Ukraine, they're going to continue on to Poland, and then off they go. They'll take Germany and Greece, and off they head for the English Channel. They'll go all over up Norway. Right? And now you're negotiating with a narrative that says the Russians want to take all of Ukraine, and dare I say, they want to take all of Europe, the world. They want, this is what the Russians want, and the Russians come in and say, sure, we'll negotiate all that crap away because we never really wanted it in the first place. So, sure, you want to make a deal that we won't invade Germany, France? I don't know if you saw the first few minutes of the Olympics. You couldn't give us France. In fact, if you said to us, we have to take over France, we'd nuke you. We'd nuke you before we take France over. So, yeah, that's an easy one. No thanks. We don't want Germany or France or whatever the case may be, right? You can have that stuff. No problem. Basically all of the things that they allege, the straw man arguments that they made, that Russia wants to do this and that and that, and this, Russian can just come up and say, give us a list of them, and we'll say no to all of those because you made those up, not us. Now you're going to have Kellogg there. He's Europe. He's the Ukrainians. Forget him. But Wickoff is a problem because Wickoff has in fact met with the Russians for hours. And all of this crap about what the Russians want to stretch out the Soviet Union again and go to the English Channel, and all of this stuff that they've been playing, all of this propaganda that they've been playing on their Western audience, Wickoff knows it ain't true. And Wickoff has tried to work out a deal, and he's tried to, and I'm sure he's come back to Trump and sat down and said, that's Trump's buddy, and said, dude, let me tell you what the Russians want. You want to know what the Russians want? I'll tell you what the Russians want. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people that get, jump up and down over everything that Trump says, right? But Trump tweeted that the Russians want to take all of Ukraine. Why does he think that? Ignore Donald Trump's assertions in his Truth Social post. Ignore them. Do not jump up and down about every Truth Social post that he makes. Read them. Take what you can from them, but understand that there are a lot of things that Donald Trump's saying in his Truth Social post, which he's communicating to the circles around him. He ain't talking to you. He's not necessarily saying, you think if he's met with Wickoff. He understands the Russians just don't want to just take all of Ukraine to have Ukraine. He knows exactly what the Russians want, but he's dealing with those mutts in the coalition of the sniffing, and he's certainly dealing with the people inside of the Beltway. So he says certain things, I guess he has to say to stay on the in crowd, but he's met with Wickoff. Wickoff has met with the Russians for hours. Wickoff knows damn well what the Russians want. Very, very clearly. He sat down with Vladimir Putin. Did you see the Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin? Vladimir Putin probably went all the way back to the year, 812 AD. Let me tell you about this. Back when we were Russians and we were using bones to crush small furry animals and eat them. We'll start there. That's what Putin starts. He goes back through Catherine the Great, Peter the something, Tsar, so and so, all the way up to today, and the name of Ukraine and why. Trust me, he has bored Wickoff to death. If you listen to Vladimir Putin talk to Tucker Carlson, he has bored. He probably spent 6 hours giving Wickoff the history of Russia and Ukraine, and he knows that stuff, word for word. So I will guarantee you that Vladimir Putin has carefully, skillfully, as an attorney that he is, articulated. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Wickoff is an attorney. Anyway, he has skillfully articulated exactly what it is that he wants and exactly why. So now when Wickoff comes in, Ukrainians are in there, Russians are in there, Wickoff's in there. Right now, the Ukrainians and Kellogg will put them all in one bag and shake them up together. Right. But here's the problem they're going to have. Wickoff is on their side of the table representing the big guy. So what do? Well, how do they snow the Russians? How do they straw man the Russians? Well, you want this, and we're not going to give it to you. And the Russians be, well, that's not what we want. And the Russians will probably, you know how the Russians are. They're very bureaucratic. They will have a detailed document articulating everything they want. Here's Mr. Wickoff, boom. Mr. Kellogg, boom. Ukrainian neo-Nazis, Adolf, whatever, boom. There you go. And here's what we want, and here's why. And we have carefully and skillfully articulated this word for word, each in your own language. So there you go. We've got a copy for you in black and white. Take a copy with you. We also have a disc for each one of you. That's going to be there in a computer form if you choose to respond. And we've emailed it to you. You know, the Russians, they're bureaucratic. They've handled all that stuff. They've crossed their T's. They've dotted their I's. And they're going to come in there very clear. Here's where we are. Now, we want just what you want to end the conflict. Here's what we need to end the conflict. And we'd be happy to tell you why and how we get there. What do you think, Wickoff? Right? And what if Trump's in the room, which he may or may not be, but let's say Wickoff's in there. Wickoff already knows what they want. Already knows what they want. What do the Ukrainians do? You see, they have portrayed the Russians as lunatics and unreasonable and just mad and angry aggressors. But now they're in a room with people who are knowledgeable. And let me add this. It's one thing, let me give you an example. People do this, and people do this in politics, right? They straw man somebody. They paint somebody as a lunatic, right? Somebody could say, you ever watch Garland Nixon? No, he's a madman. He's a lunatic, an absolute, he's a commie. No, he's a anarchist. No, he's a far right, crazy. He's this, he's that. They could tell you all of these things. No, he's a black nationalist, a regular Malcolm X, I tell you, whatever. They could tell you anything they want about Garland Nixon. And you could be like, oh my God, he's all of those things. He scares me to death, right? And then somebody turn on my channel. Okay, I got on my weird hat today, right? But my daughter gave me this hat, so that's why I'm wearing it. But at any rate, but then you sit down and you say, oh my God, this Garland Nixon, an absolute lunatic, a madman. He's insane. I think I'm going to watch one of his videos to see just how crazy he is. And you watch the video and you're like, I may not agree with everything Garland says. Fair enough. But he doesn't seem like a crazy person. You told me he was a madman, a crazy person, that he was a communist. He was a communist. He was an anarchist. He was a libertarian. You just filled in every far right wing, far left wing, everything in between, that you added everything and told me Garland was all of those things and the most extreme of them. And I listened to him. He just sounds like a freaking guy sitting in front of a computer with telling me what he thinks. He didn't. What are you talking about? You told me this guy was a complete lunatic. And he may be, but at least the video that I watched, it really didn't come out, right? So here's my point. The Ukrainians, the Europeans spend all their time painting the Russians as crazy hordes that want to come across the border and eat them. And now they got to sit in the room with Wickoff, whoever the hell else, and have a talk with them. But they're crazy people. They're madmen that are trying to kill you. But you got to have a talk with them. And you know what the things that comes out there? Now, the Ukrainians may go home and say, I told you the Russians are madmen. But to Wickoff, to whoever's watching, they're going to say, Russians seem fairly professional to me. They didn't say they wanted to kill and eat the Ukrainians. They just said, we're just trying to live in peace, dude. You guys are on our border throwing stuff at us. You outlawed our language. We didn't outlaw your language. Ukrainian is not outlawed in Russian. You outlawed our way of worshiping. The Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church ain't outlawed in Ukraine, in Russia, but ours is outlawed. And they can go on and on and on. We're the crazy people, supposedly, as Russians. Well, then why are you the ones outlawing all of these parties? The Communist Party, this party, all of these parties are outlawed in Ukraine. The Communist Party is not outlawed in Russia. It's the second largest party. It's welcome. It's part of our. It's part of our. What do they call the parliament in Russia? Whatever the hell it is, I don't know. But whatever they call it, it's part of our political system. We have various parties. We got parties we don't like. We got parties we do like. We got parties that we're not even sure if we like. Little teeny ones, big ones, but they're not outlawed. So if we're the crazy people, why is it that you outlaw everything to do with us? You can have a Ukrainian statue. You can read Ukrainian books. You can listen to Ukrainian music in Russian, but you can't do any of that in Ukraine. You can't listen to any of the Russian stuff. So how is it that we're the crazy people? We're just asking you to follow our lead. Let's start here. Stop outlawing the Russian language. You got Russian speakers. Stop outlawing our church and locking up our bishops. Stop, outlaw. You can't even have like a Russian breed cat, for God's sake. You can't speak Russian or have Russian in school. So when the Russians start with that kind of stuff, look, why don't you just these are your own citizens, Ukrainians. If they want to speak friggin' Spanish, let them speak Spanish. Maybe. Okay, so you say you can't speak Spanish in school, but you can speak it in the street, at home, in your church. So let's start there. And the Ukrainians can't do anything. If the Russians say, let's just start here in a show of good faith, we'll do this, and you guys go back and say, you know what, the Russian language is no longer outlawed. See, the Russians could do something like that. They could start off and say, let's do an act of good faith. We'll give you an act of good faith. We won't attack energy infrastructure. We'll leave that go. In return, you legalize the speaking of Russian. How's that? Fair enough? The Russians can do something like that because the real maniacs are the neo-Nazis. And the Russians can say, we have a problem with the Nazi ideology, with people walking around goose-stepping with friggin' swastikas all over them. Come on and look at Wickoff. Wickoff, you're Jewish, dude. Tell me, whose side are you on here, buddy? Are you on the goose-stepper side? How you think they're going to like you, right? So my point being, that it's a huge problem for the Ukrainians to sit in front of the Russians, because it's easy to create a narrative when somebody's not in the room. It's easy to create a narrative that Garland Nixon is a lunatic monster until you sit down and you watch one of Garland Nixon's videos and you say, I agree with some of the stuff and not some of the stuff, but he's not a lunatic monster. The guy makes a little bit of sense sometimes, right? It's easy to do all of this crap. And the problem I feel is this: if this ever happens and they get in a room with the Russians and Wickoff's there, they're going to have a problem. Their narrative will collapse. And there's going to be internal strife. There's going to be maybe some violence. There's going to be extreme internal problems in Ukraine, because the United States government, via its intelligence agencies, have had great success in Ukraine. And what I mean is this: what was their plan? Why were they in Ukraine since the 1940s or 50s or whatever, right? Brainwashing and propagandizing the public to be neo-Nazis and to hate Russians, because the foundation of European fascism is to hate Russians, because the foundation of European fascism is to go steal all the Russian stuff. And you can't steal all their stuff unless you hate them and subhumanize them. Like, Africa, that's what they do. They subhumanize people. Why? Because they got stuff we want. Hey, those Muslims are inhuman. Why? Well, they got a lot of oil laying around. And if they're humans, how can we justify killing them and stealing their oil, right? They're the Russians, right? My point, I guess, I just thought about this. So what happens? You have to accept the humanity of the Russians in order to negotiate with them, right? Think about this. One of the things that the EU didn't want to do, we won't talk to the Russians. Why? Because they're madmen, they're crazy, and they're irrational. To negotiate with them, you can't negotiate with people who are crazy and irrational, can you? The fact that you are negotiating with them implies that they are rational. It implies that you feel, think about this. You would think that based on what the Europeans have said and the Ukrainians, that if you sit down in a room with a Russian, any Russian, they'll pull out a knife and just attack you like a crazy person and just start stabbing you. Why? Because they're just crazy madmen who just want to kill anybody they can, right? If you go in a room and you sit down and talk with them, that kind of implies that you don't think they're crazy madmen who are out of control, that they're just some kind of a savages. They're in a murderous frenzy. That's what we're hearing. They're savages in a murderous frenzy. But if you sit in a room with them, you ain't sitting in a room with savages who are in a murderous frenzy. You're going to sit in a room with a bunch of guys with business suits that have carefully and skillfully written out their demands and handed them to you. Those are not crazy mad killers. Those are diplomats. Those are intellectuals, right? So you're sitting in the room and you're so there's a term that they'll use in the West, and that is you can't, what's that term? They'll say you can't give legitimacy. You can't legitimize Putin. In other words, you can't accept his humanity. You can't accept him as a statesman. You can't accept him as the leader of the country. He has to be a crazy, mad savage so you can steal all of his stuff. To sit down and talk with the Russians legitimizes them. And here's what I mean. Now, it doesn't legitimize the Russians. The Russians are legitimate to the world. They're legitimate people to the world. My point is, it legitimizes them in the realm of the narrative. The European narrative of the savages. We've got to kill the savages and take their resources, right? Once you sit down and talk with them, they're not savages anymore. And once the Ukrainians sit down and talk with them, how do they go back to Kiev? We sat down and talked with some Russians. Why? You can't talk with Russians. They're savages. They'll just try to kill you. Did they try to kill you? Did they leap across the table with knives in their teeth, with their claws out, and just start attacking you like crazy people? Like, what's this guy? There was a guy named Daniel. I cannot remember his name when I was in law enforcement. And they were transporting Daniel, whatever his name was. And from the Clifton T. Perkins, it was a home for the criminally insane. This was not a prison. No. The people in here were not in prison. They were the criminally insane. I think you know what that means. And they're driving this guy up Dorsey Road. Some kind of way, the guy escaped from some prison van. A man who is in a home for the criminally insane. I think you know what happened after that. So he's the madman. He goes into a church, and there's during the week, there were people who volunteered to clean the church, and there was an old man and an old woman in the church. He found a knife and leapt upon them and slashed both of them. Now, they both lived, but they got slashed with a knife, and off he runs, right? He was a one-man crime spree. He was what they're claiming the Russian is, an absolute madman. He attacked people. He stole cars. He beat people mercilessly. And to show you how crazy Daniel, I wish I could remember his name. I have to look it up. How crazy he was. I knew some of the guys who finally got him. He was finally found in D.C. And Daniel, not Jones, that's the quarterback for the Giants. Daniel, can't think of his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he was completely insane. And let me tell you, this is how you know he was crazy. This is how you know crazy. Insane, criminally insane. So old Daniel, whatever his name is hiding in some bushes. And at that point, the DC cops knew what they had. Somebody said, they saw the guy, looked like a crazy person, whatever. He ran in some bushes. So they came out with the dogs. And you know what police dogs look like? Big shepherds. And if you've ever seen them, like the guy gets out of the car and he's holding the dog by the leash, and the dog's pawing it. He's barking, slobber running out of his mouth. He's pawing at the air like a friggin' werewolf, and just about that size. These gigantic shepherds, right, with mouths that'll tear you to shreds, slobbering and pawing at the air like madmen. And that's deliberately to intimidate you. And this big cop, can barely hold the cop back, hold this dog back, right? And they're, screaming and barking and frothing at the mouth. Let me at him. So they then yell with a loudspeaker, Daniel, whatever, we know you're in there in the bushes. Come out immediately, or we're going to let the dogs go. Now, if you are sane and you look out there and you see them dogs, you're coming out of those bushes, because if the dogs are let go, you're not going to be happy. Well, Daniel, whatever his name is, for the life of me, I can't remember. I will, of course, as soon as I get off, I will remember. He was on Dorsey Road where he got away in Hanover, Maryland, where he escaped. I imagine some people got fired for that. Well, he wouldn't come out of the bushes. And they let the dogs go. And I don't have to tell you what the dogs did. The dogs went in there and they bit him, from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. So needless to say, Daniel found Jesus, as they say, and came out of the bushes with the dogs attached to him. And then they took him somewhere and he got sewed all up. And back he went to this home for the criminally insane, right? That's what they're claiming the Russians are. A guy so crazy that he won't even come out of the bushes when these gigantic police dogs are barking and frothing at the mouth to come get him. Nope, he takes a bite, right? I'll tell you what, I bet he got himself together when those dogs got a grip on him. It's unfortunate. I don't want some poor mentally ill person to get bit up by dogs, but that guy, look, there's times when you need the cops. And when a one-man crime wave is roaming the street, attacking innocent people, you really want the cops to show up and get this guy. So anyway, here's my point. You're saying that's what the Russians are. That they're like this guy, that they're a one-man crime spree, if any Russian comes in and he sees a Ukrainian, he's going to immediately attack him. But that narrative is gone. That narrative melts away. He said, Wickoff and Kellogg sits down, the Russians come in, they're going to have on nice suits and haircuts, professional guys, and they're going to sit down and I forgot who the Russians are sending, but they're sending some brilliant professional guys and they're ready to talk. And they've met for hours, no doubt. They've got their instructions. They understand what they can and can't say. They understand the parameters and what have you. I'm no doubt they have a plan as to how they're going to go about this. Trump could be there. And now you're the Ukrainians. And you said the Russians were the crazy people. See, that's the problem. How do you sit down at a meeting with the Russians and read the proposals by the Russians and walk away with written proposals by the Russians and have the Russians listen to what you say? Don't forget, Trump in the past has said, it's kind of been easier dealing with the Russians than it is with the Ukrainians. Like the Russians are pretty much out front. I know what they want. The Ukrainians are acting like friggin' lunatics. Trump has come out and said that, right? I think he said it was easier dealing with China than it was the EU when it came to the tariffs, right? Bottom line, if Trump's working on a deal, which he doesn't seem to be real good at getting deals right now, but if he's working on the deals, he sits down and at some point he's going to say it's easier to work with A than B. If you got two options, A and B, one's easier than the other, it's pretty obvious. And right now, I think this is a big deal. Number one, the Ukrainians got to get out because can't do this Thursday because it, quote, as the term they would use, legitimizes, I would say humanizes the Russians. It accepts the humanity of the Russians and accepts that they aren't crazy, aggressive lunatics like Daniel, what's his name? And how do you go back to that? How do you go back to the Russians are crazies and lunatics after you've sat down at a table and had a cup of coffee with them and talked with them? And Wickoff talked with him. And Wickoff said, what do you got to say, Russians? And the Russians said, no, here, blah, we think this, or that. What do you got to say, Ukrainians? Well, we know whatever, and we know this and that. And Wickoff's going to be like, well, okay, how about this? And you sit down, and then Wickoff, and you get up, and Wickoff shakes hands with the Russians. All right. And the Russians go to shake hands. And the Ukrainians can't shake hands with the Russians, can they? See, that's another thing the Russians need to definitely do. The Russians got it when it's all Wickoff. Yeah, nice. Okay, have a great day. Oh, nice suit you got there. I like the tailoring of it. Good material. Let me know who your tailor is. We need to talk. I'd love to get a suit like that. There's the Ukrainians and the Russians go, oh, yes. Oh, guys, it was nice talking with you. And they stick their hands out to shake their hands. The Ukrainians can't shake the hands of Russians. They're going to be like, oh, crap. If I don't shake the hands with them, then I look like a schlep because Wickoff shook their hands with them and they had a kind word and everything was professional and there was no hatred. Now the Russians are attempting to shake hands with me, but if I shake hands with them, I'll get shot as soon as I get back to Kiev. If I don't shake hands with them, I look bad in the eyes of all the onlookers, including Wickoff and potentially Trump if he's in the room. And Trump's going to be like, hey, you ain't shaking hands with those guys. Everybody else shook hands. How come you can't shake hands? And you'll be like, whoa, because I'll get shot as soon as I get back to Kiev if I shake hands with a Russian. But you can't say that, can you? You can't say that. And so now you go back. This, to me, If this happens, I hope Trump shows for the extra pressure. If this happens, man, this is going to be the word. I'm not looking for the word turning point. That's not what the word, because there ain't a turning point, because this is a conflict. Um, it's between the West and, it's a U.S. Well, it is still a U.S. proxy war, but the current president of the U.S. wants the hell out of the proxy war. You know what I mean? The organ grinder don't want the monkey anymore. The monkey's an orphan, and these onlookers here in the crowd are trying to hold on and say, well, we'll be the new organ grinders, but they don't have the wherewithal to be organ grinders, number one. And number two, nobody can control the monkey anymore. The monkey now thinks it's the organ grinder. So this is going to be, keep an eye on these next 2 days. Do the Ukrainians find a way out, which they have to, but they can't? Is Trump going to show up there? I hope he does, because boy, is that going to change the dynamics of how see, if Trump shows up, it'll be him literally looking over the shoulders of the Ukrainians, not the Russians. The Russians are all for Trump showing up, not Wickoff. Kellogg will be a little freaked out about it, no doubt, but Wickoff would be great. In fact, Wickoff will probably like it, because he'll be like, okay, I don't even have to go back to Trump and tell him what I saw. You saw it, brother. You saw what I saw. Did you see what I saw? I saw it. I talked to the Russians. I talked to Ukrainians. Who was acting more reasonable? So I'm going to hope, cross my fingers, hope that Trump shows up. I think right now also you've got a mad scramble in the deep state, because if I can figure that out, a schlump on YouTube, if I can figure these things out, and the people in the chat are way ahead of me, if we can figure that out, the MI6 and CIA can figure it out. And they are plotting right now, what in the name of God can we do prior to this to stop this thing from happening? Number one. Number two, watch the New York Times and the Washington Post. Watch CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. If you want to know what's going on with the deep state, if you want to know what's going on with the intelligence community and all of this stuff, watch what they do in the Telegraph, the Economist, the Financial Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the next couple of days, and particularly Thursday morning. Thursday morning's big. So this is really going to be. Let me look and see. I'm going to check and see, is there anything new? Okay, here's one. Let's look at it together. Let's do this. Let's look at this article, Kremlin issues update. Kremlin issues update on preparations for potential Ukraine talks. Let's see. When asked by journalists on Tuesday if the talks in Istanbul would actually take place, Peskov replied that, quote, the Russian side continues to prepare for the negotiations that are scheduled to take place on Thursday. Peskov also refused to reveal the lineup of the Russian delegation for the potential negotiations, saying, quote, we will announce it as soon as the president deems it necessary. He appeared to rule out the possibility of Ukraine's Western European backers taking part in the peace process between Moscow and Kiev in any form. Western Europe is, after all, entirely on Ukraine's side. It cannot claim to have an unbiased approach. Its approach is not balanced. It's rather pro-war, aimed at continuing the fighting, which is in sharp contrast to the approach demonstrated, for example, by Moscow or Washington. Now, the Russians are not stupid. They understand that the Americans are a party to the conflict, but I think it's beneficial. I think it's beneficial to the Russians to make that argument and to somehow say, look, I'll put it like this, though. Let's be honest. There is some substance to that. I mean, they didn't say that Trump isn't a party to the conflict. They just said, seeking to end the conflict rather than seeking to continue the war. And Trump is seeking to he's seeking to get the hell out of there and end it as best he can. Let's see, anything else? I'm looking through some Russia. Today, I don't see anything else. Uh, let's see. Oh, here we go. Trump issues ultimatum saying Russia, Ukraine should hold direct talk. Let's take a look at that before I go. One last thing. This is in TASS, which is Russia's, kind of main newspaper. U.S. President Donald Trump insists that Moscow and Kyiv should hold direct negotiations. Trump's special envoy Steve Wickoff said, warning that Washington will otherwise walk away. Oh boy! So the Trump team have actually, the Ukrainians won out, and Trump ain't giving them an out. That's interesting. He's issued an ultimatum to both sides that without those direct talks, well, they didn't technically to both sides because the Russians are the ones that called for it. But okay, this makes sense. If they don't occur quickly, he believes the United States ought to step back from this conflict, whatever that means, and just not be involved. Wickoff said in an interview with Breitbart News recorded on May 8th. This is something that we want to mediate. It's not our war. Well, it is. We know that. We didn't start the war. Yeah, they did. But we want to help to end it. The way that happens is a ceasefire. But the Russians have said, we will do a ceasefire if it addresses the root causes of the conflict. And I'm with that. Never rule out anything if it addresses the root causes of the conflict. According to Wickoff, if direct talks between Russia and Ukraine bring any result, there'll be a strong chance to getting to an end to this conflict. Earlier, Trump stated that his administration will abandon its push for a peace settlement in Ukraine if one of the two sides makes it very difficult. Also, he warned that Washington will walk away from the negotiations to end the conflict if it finds that this is not doable. Okay, so Trump, here's what happened. It seems to me Trump kind of went back, was able to get back to where he was before, saying, I want out. And if one of the two sides ain't working towards that way, I'll get out. This is an opportunity now to put your cards on the table. And how do the Ukrainians conduct themselves in the presence of Russian representatives when, in fact, their ideology, the foundation of their ideology, is a visceral, emotional hatred of all things Russian? How do they conduct themselves? I hope Trump shows up. That ought to be fun. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let me see. Do we have any? If we got any super chats, I will. Nope, no super chats. If we had any super chats, I'd answer the super chats. I see no super chats or anything like that. All right. Well, you notice at the bottom there, P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland, 21061. I've got a P.O. Box now for those who want to use snail mail. If you want to mail me whatever you might want to mail me, you might want to mail a book. You might want to mail. Well, I've got some letters, a whole pile of letters. You might want to mail me some letters. You might want to mail a donation, whatever you want to mail. There's my snail mail mailing address. Also, we got PayPal, we got Patreon. Buy me a coffee is always a great option. All that kinds of stuff. Cash App, you name it. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble. Follow me on Telegram. And guess what? Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got a super chat. How come we forgot about the neocons and it's all about the Europeans lately? Is there some kind of script about it? I don't see much of a difference between the Europeans and the neocons. I think the European ruling elite effectively represent the neocon positions. So I don't think it's, as long as you're dealing with the coalition of the sniffing, the Macron, Starmers, etc., they represent the neocons. I believe that they have regular talks and discussions with the people in Washington. Everybody from Lindsey Graham to the, to the Chris Murphys and the neocons on both parties, or in the duopoly, as they say, are in regular conversation. And I think that they have an inside-outside game where the Europeans play this part of the game and the insiders in Washington are coming after Trump in the other part of the game, trying to push him in a direction they want. So thank you. New World Order, NWO. Let me see, is there anything else? Let's see. Is there somebody on Rockfin who might have? Let me see what's happening on Rockfin. Somebody there. Uh-oh. Okay. I'm not doing well here on Rockfin. All right, I'll go to Rumble. We'll try Rockfin back in a second. Do we have, oh, we got a Rumble rant, Rumble rant. And someone says, don't forget, Benzo Beans says, don't forget the Rumble family. Thank you very much for the Rumble family. Let me see, but how about some Trump admitted, I'll read a couple things off Rumble. Trump admitted in the first term he has not read any books in 50 years. Dr. Seuss at age 20 plus. Trump can't play chess, can't play checkers, loses every time at tic-tac-toe, 6 bankruptcy show. Okay. Let's see. So the other next person, extreme poor judge of character at best. Trump is qualified to clean up dog poop, but nothing more. Okay, well, everybody's got a right to say what they got to say. What else do we have? We got another Rumble rant that says, I don't know, Garland. I keep going back to what you say. You are what your record says you are. This is the highest of stakes, so I expect they'll try to decapitate. Interesting. Let's see. Thank you very much for the Rumble rant. Makes me think that the really ugly anti-Semites are plants. Why are they allowed to say such sickening things? Well, now I would agree with you that there are people who are online who are saying very anti-Semitic stuff, who are in fact agents and operators and agent provocateurs, that they're saying that stuff because they want to try to get people to say more of it, because then they can say, I was on YouTube and Garland Nixon show and there was a bunch of stinking anti-Semites. They're everywhere. Garland's got to go. He's an anti-Semite. He's a white supremacist, I say, which I have been called before. All right. Thank you very much. Mitsuski, it has a super sticker. Certainly appreciate it. Now, maybe, just maybe, we can try. Maybe, just maybe. Okay. YouTube. And no, I don't see. No. Well, someone says, hello, everyone. My wife had advanced cancer. Oh, for God's sake. Somebody puts this the other day. And look, it's one of these people in there. Hello, my wife had cancer and she took this miracle cure. Click here and get yours. Make sure you give us your payment information so that we can raid your bank account. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that's it for the. Yeah, that's it. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. You know the deal. Share this on all your social media platforms. And of course, if you can afford to, make a donation. If you can't, just share it on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.